And then we've got this Ukrainian election, such as it is. Now, the level of violence in Ukraine remains quite high, and we've had a number of incidents in which the Ukrainian armed forces have been taking it on the chin. On Thursday, in an incident which attracted some attention, about a dozen Ukrainian military people were killed in those eastern provinces that are interested in greater autonomy or independence. And today, we have a reported friendly fire incident, if that's what it is, where Ukrainian army helicopters attacked their own ground positions. Many explanations. Were these Ukrainian conscripts who refused to kill protesters, and were they being punished? Was it simply a staged incident that the Ukrainian army wanted to blame on the separatists, as they call them? So we don't know that, but level of violence continues high. Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, has demanded to know the truth. Is it the case that a right sector, Pravi sector, fascist delegation came here to Washington, D.C., and did they meet secretly with the U.S. Assistant Secretary for European Affairs, Victoria Nuland, the foul-mouthed Victoria Nuland, wife of the neocon Kagan and a key part of the neocon machine there in the State Department? That's an interesting question. People should raise that at the State Department briefing. The NATO command says that there are some indications that the Russian military forces drawn up at the border with Ukraine have been receding somewhat. So I suppose in the middle of this we ought to put that Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, speaking today at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, indicated that he would accept the results of this election. An election is always okay. He doesn't like what else is going on. He says that Russian journalists, as we've just mentioned, are being held in Gestapo prisons by the Kiev fascists. And he also warned once again that sanctions boomerang. Now, to some, this would indicate a possible deal, a sub-rosa understanding between Putin and Poroshenko, the chocolate king, the member of the British-centered cocoa cartel, chocolate cartel, but has he been pulled away? This is the so-called Willy Wonka of Ukraine with the chocolate factory. He's had some clashes lately with Russia. One of his factories was, I believe, confiscated, and I think he lost some property there when Crimea was repatriated. But you get the idea. Poroshenko, perhaps an opportunist, perhaps bribed, perhaps some combination of carrot and stick. So is Putin willing to try to get along for a time with Poroshenko? Remember, in this whole question, you've got to take the long view, because Putin is certainly taking the long view. This is always one of the strengths of Russian diplomacy and strategy, is that it's not oriented towards immediate results, that it has an idea of the long view, and it's willing to exercise patience. And again, the trump card really for Russia is that when those genocidal economic sanctions of the International Monetary Fund begin to bite with all their full fury, and notice, those sanctions, the austerity conditionalities dictated by the IMF, right, the neoliberal shock therapy and rape of Ukraine, those have been delayed until after this vote, with the idea that it would be better for those running for office if they didn't have to explain and support the IMF sanctions. But when those sanctions begin to bite after the elections, whoever is in power is going to be chewed up pretty fast. So it's Poroshenko leading in the polls, and of course the other challenger, Timoshenko, the kleptocratic gas princess and NATO agent. Now, the other thing that Putin seems to be figuring is that Ukraine voters will not come out for Svoboda. They will not come out for right sector. They will not come out for Yarosh or Parubi or others. So the future for Ukraine looks grim in that sense. Right? The Kiev fascist clique will soon be at least diluted to some extent. However, we should also remember these are not free elections. Just last week we had the fascist thug President Turchinov in his capacity. He's the president, I guess, but he's president by virtue of being the president of this infamous Rada in Kiev. The Communist Party leader was giving a speech about how a Nazi regime had taken hold in Kiev, and Turchinov simply said, "You shut up, you sit down, and by the way, we're going to now outlaw the Communist Party." That's the level in Kiev, and of course, behind Turchinov, happy to play along with him on this, are these Nazi stormtrooper, brown shirt, Sturmabteilung types, the relics of the late Muzichka, in other words, the right sector. So remember that members of the Rada have been beaten up. They have been forced to flee, or sometimes they've been stopped from fleeing, so they could be beaten up some more. There are several hundred members of the Kiev Rada who disappeared from Kiev. They left Kiev at the time of the coup, and they haven't shown up since. In other words, you're dealing with a rump Rada. You've got a rump Ukraine, and fittingly enough, you've got a rump Rada. Presidential candidates have also been beaten up, not just members of the Rada, but presidential candidates beaten up and forced to withdraw from contention. So with that kind of reign of terror, the mob rule, the reign of the thug and the hooligan and the tough, this is what we have going in Ukraine at this point. So Putin says he's going to hold his nose and see what happens. And we'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio.